Hello everyone, and welcome to this video on my recommendations for Territorialio. So, many of you have probably been frustrated with the recent string of changes from the Territorialio developer. There's been exploits introduced, there's been fundamental mechanics that have messed with, and the game doesn't feel like it used to. And many people are frustrated. So in this video, I'm going to walk through some of the recommendations I have going forward. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to put together a complex edit of all the bullshit we've seen, and I think most of us are just sick of David wasting our time, so I'm just going to overlay this over some old pre-patch gameplay. Maybe you want to listen to it podcast style, not sure, but let's jump into it and start off with the changes. So the first change that I want to talk about is all attacks taking one row, and I don't know how many times I've said this, but Territorialio has always been a game about balancing troops and land and strategically expanding. And the type of nonsense of all these exploits, the cheat, the Osmanli, whatever you want to call it, it feels like something that shouldn't be in the game. It feels really troll, it feels really bullshit, and you can also have critiques about outposts of players just like spamming on islands and being able to mess with like important pivot points. I've even seen some footage in games of basically people being wrecked at the beginning of the game just because of sniping and basically panic. It feels like something that isn't really rewarding the type of dynamics that we've seen in the past, and it feels just like troll. Like it doesn't make sense why we needed this. So I would recommend getting rid of the attacks taking one row so we kind of come back to this reality. It might have been fun for a week, but I don't feel like this is like legitimate going forward. Talking about the next points, we got to talk about the boats. So the boats, there's a lot of things on here. The first point that I have is I would revert boat size to pre 1.98.5 updates. Boats are difficult to see. And this is paired with the send levels being difficult to see, which really makes boat defense kind of a nightmare for people who really rely on that. For context, I play most of the time as a solo, and I have to rely on managing a lot of different things, and not being able to see the send levels of the boats, having them be incredibly tiny, paired with bots spamming boats, which we can all talk about how this works together, it just seems dumb, and it doesn't really seem like it adds anything to the game making this change. Before, when you send out a massive boat, being able to recognize that there is a massive threat is really, really helpful, and it adds something kind of dynamic to the game. Having all the boats be pretty much the same, not updating us on really how they've changed, just seems troll and feels like a waste of time. Along these lines, I think another change that would be important to consider is adjusting boat speed differences to be more comparable to pre 1.98.5. So for those well, I think most people know, boats, depending on how much you send, have different speeds, and there still are differences on the current balance, but they're much less pronounced, and it seems to take away some of the dynamic elements of boats. It's again this type of like weird standardization that took away kind of an element of the game that I think is important, that if I want to get somewhere fast, I have to weigh the pros and cons of what type of size boats I want to send. There's still this dynamic, but it's a lot less pronounced, and with how slow boats have been made, with this balance, they were initially made really fast and then a lot slower. It just feels like troll, and I don't even understand like what is the bullshit logic of this. Along these lines, I'd also say I have not heard from talking with a lot of elite players, this is a complaint, but I think you need to think about boat hitboxes, because in my experience, I think it's different. Maybe it just has to do with boats being smaller, but what I found is actually clicking and redirecting boats to be not as straightforward in the past. It doesn't mean in the past it was perfect. I think it could have used improvements, but I would really consider going back to something more comparable to this. I know I haven't heard other people mention this, but I think that is something I've noticed. In terms of some other thoughts on boats, I think it's worth thinking about boat attack notifications and what type of game you want to have. I heard an opinion from a very advanced player that this is an important element of training beginners, that you have to look out for boats. And a lot of my channel is education based. I want people to be able to understand you need to defend from boats. But also what we got to understand is the spam from bots, that's not helpful getting 20 notifications. And it also takes away some of the impact of the being attacked symbol or notification in the past. So essentially, I think with the kind of boat attack notifications, what's really important to consider is basically, do we want a game that's kind of catering more for this introduction? You know, maybe. Or is it going to be back in the past where you have to have this really significant map awareness? You know, if it was kept I don't have a problem with it. There's plenty of solutions to this, but it's something to think about with the nuances of trying to dissect these changes. The next point is talking about glowing votes. And I've actually consulted a lot of different people on these changes, and there's been a lot of consensus, but this was a point where different people had different opinions. I think glowing votes are pretty to look at, but I also think with how bots attack now and spam votes, it can be incredibly distracting if you have to manage a massive front, and with vote send levels being very hard to detect, seeing like 50 votes coming at you is kind of troll and just bullshit. So I think they're pretty. I think there is a dynamic of alerting players with lower map awareness about what's going on, when in the past you had to pay more attention. And essentially what we can think of is, what type of game do we want in Territorialio? Do we want this game that's going to really be catering to these beginner players of, oh, I see this giant light coming, and maybe that's the direction things going. It is pretty. I think it is cool on like single player and stuff. But also having to have map awareness and recognize what's going on was kind of a big theme of Territorial in the past year. So I think the jury's out on that point, but I think adjusting the other mechanics and visuals and basically doing a revert of this stuff makes a lot of sense. So going on to the next point, which is bots, I've heard zero positive comments about the bots. In 1v1, people describe them as basically adding more RNG, that if you have a bad bot with like really late cycle sends next to you, that can mess up your game a lot more than it did in the past. And that I don't think anyone really likes. It just feels like I don't understand why this needed to be changed. Like legitimately, going through micro now feels a lot slower. It makes the game feel sluggish and clunky. And it's one of those things of, what is this really adding to the game with this increased bot targeting and stuff like that? It just feels like it slows things down. The game feels less dynamic. And I've heard zero people say they like it. You have to be more methodical now. But I mean, with the RNG stuff in 1v1, I'm not prepared to make that critique in multiplayer. It just feels like troll and almost pointless. So not sure what to say about that, but I definitely revert it. In terms of some other dynamics, in terms of points and peace, I would revert the points awarded from 90% occupation to victory. So for those of you who don't know, in team games, you now gain points for your clan when you have 90% of the map. Now, I kind of think this might have been introduced because of the bugginess of peace vote not being showing up anymore. But it just seems troll. Like, I don't know. Territorialio has always had this kind of classic thing of you finish the game. So why are we saying once you get 90%, and before it was 80%, it's just good? I don't really know. And like with the new call for peace vote, which is good, I don't understand like what this is really adding. I think this might have been a band-aid to the game, but really I think you should get points when the game is over. It's not that radical, and it just seems, like what? Same kind of deal. I think you need to revert victory conditions when you have 99% occupation. This ties into the whole bullshit dynamic of people being trapped in games and not knowing what to do. If you're watching this video, you probably already know. But so you know, there's people still posting on Reddit, I'm trapped in a game, help me. And I don't even know. It's probably like some bullshit bug, and this is like some band-aid on it. But really, just the game should be over at 99% occupation. So, moving on to the next point of all the revert shit, I think admin system needs to be reworked. So talking with a bunch of people, I mean, it's so obvious that this vindictive popularity contest where random people on a formula we don't know can reduce 1v1 players' elo. Like think about that. It's a vindictive popularity contest where random people can reduce 1v1 players' elo. Of people who have no idea what's going on in 1v1. That makes no sense. I think this needs a rework thinking about who's engaging in 1v1. I don't know if popularity is the most key point here. And essentially, I have no business regulating who's basically using exploits in 1v1. I know of one person, but the impact of how this was implemented is a ton of people lost elo pointlessly. And it just seems like bullshit. Sure, maybe David can say, as he's claimed in the forum, oh, it's stabilized, it's good. But I think it's actually worth working with the community to think about how the system is going to work. And what he has mentioned is that this system is going to be expanded to addressing problematic usernames. And I don't know, many people have kind of brought up points of, okay, with some of the nuances of how he's adjusted the voting, he should have reset it. Also, potentially just setting up a dedicated admin team who can help deal with this might be a really good strategy. We already have that in Discord, but this type of stuff, I don't think everyone should be having a say on nerfing people's elo. That doesn't almost seem like it doesn't seem like democracy in this case is necessarily going to be the best way. Maybe coming up with some other solutions by democratically deciding the system could be better than kind of throwing it in the hands of a lot of people who have misused the system for now. So these are my main recommendations. I also have some things, like 2 things that I think are good. The peace vote's great, but no one knows about it. Then there's some other kind of nonsense things. I think the new boat collisions are good. And the other stuff's kind of troll. Fun fact, if you didn't know, you can survive in games with 0 land in a boat, but no one cares about that. And I have 4 points going forward that I think are really crucial to actually having an alright game. So the changelog, my god, just update the changelog, dude. Stop like posting comments at whatever fucking time in random Discord servers. Our church this. No one knows about that. Just update the changelog and actually develop some type of process where you talk about what you're thinking with these type of things. People are not understanding what's going on, and it's disorientating, and it's demotivating. Just communicate what's going on like a normal person, okay? Like just like a normal person, just like a normal game developer. The next stuff, oh my god, it's so obvious. Everyone repeats this all the time. Work on this. Changing a map, like a new map every month would be really cool. You know, a lot of how Territorial picked up pace was because of YouTubers in adding some type of novel things that really make people want to get back into the game. Not this weird economic and voting system that's kind of a niche thing that maybe it's doing some account system stuff in terms of permanency that's good, but it comes after this fucking nightmare string of updates, like whatever. Just add a map, bro. Just like add a map. Or maybe even talk to us about it, because I've heard there's potentially some legal concerns. Just communicate what like the status of these type of things a lot of people who are interested in the game want to see. The next thing, oh my god, such a broken record. Work on custom game modes, or if there's issues with it, try to give people a timeline or explain kind of what's going on. That could give the game so much potential. Imagine YouTubers like Drew, like Danielson, being able to have these large custom games that can take advantage of some of the kind of cool dynamics we see in Territorialio. There's so many things like tournaments and stuff like that could really bring like a type of spark, and so many people would be interested in this. Like playing with friends. I don't even know what to say, bro. Like it's also obvious. And then the last point is, I think, and I can come up with more detailed suggestions, is develop a process to systematically account for community feedback. People don't feel heard. And it's kind of weird because like some of these recent updates are trying to implement like a diplomacy system, but how everything's being implemented is really authoritarian like what the fuck, bro? But find a way to systematically account for what people are saying. It doesn't mean everyone's going to agree. It's fine to have conversation. And David clearly has editorial authority, for better or worse. And I don't think the solution is everyone sticks their head in the sand while David does whatever the fuck he wants, though maybe most people do kind of feel depressed like that. But having some type of dialogue of figuring out what are the things people see issues with. Like all these things I pointed out, like the fucking bots, the fucking attacks, the fucking bots. I'm sorry, I don't want to rant. But find a way to create a systematic process that we can address this stuff going forward. Like, listen, y'all, if you got this far, I don't want to make rants videos, bro. I don't. I just want to play TT. And I think everyone does, and I'm just trying to speak to the kind of issues. So let me know what you think in the comments, if you agreed or disagreed with this stuff. And hopefully, maybe there's a there's a random chance that David can change, and that we can actually get back to the kind of territorial we all want to see. So thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.